Yeah, like on the back and then like.
Just deciding my body's waiting to decide if I want to throw up. Gonna decide to come to me or not to. So just wait for that.
Because what's today?
We have a duel.
Oh,
So
so you didn't come for math.
no, not really. I don't know what I think. I think it's only 5 minutes.
Yeah.
I'm just.
Well, yeah, but. And then with the other game.
Sometimes if it's like a Friday, I get when you write yourself about.
Thanks to those of you that did not require direct orders to notice that there's writing on the TV and that our phones should, of course, be put away. You can catch up on all your TikToks and Insta tweets and your Snapgrams and all that. You can do that in about an hour. So I don't think this is hard. I always say that, but I really don't. It'll be a little bit weird at first. So this is our warm up because you already know how to do this. And I'm going to try to convince you that what I'm teaching you today is really just sort of a buffed up version, sort of a combined version of stuff you already know. That's the goal. So you're going to hear the word composition. So composed functions, composition functions, those are all terms you're going to hear kind of thrown around here. So our first warm-up is something that we learned, I would say it was probably honestly at least maybe a couple of weeks ago. And that is if I give you a function, the first one, his name is f, he's a function of x. Remember, functions basically just say, feed me, give me food, and I will do math and I will spit you back an answer when I'm done. So the first function named f is a function that takes whatever you feed him and he multiplies it by -4, gets an answer, and then he adds 5, gets an answer, and then pops that out, and that's your output. Remember, functions are input-output based. So for the function f of x, when I ask you to find f of -2, I'll color code this for you. That just means that you're going to put -2, because that's your input, right here in place of that red x. Remember that that's how we evaluate a function. It's not difficult mathematics. So when I put -2, the red -2, where the red x is at, that problem now, remember this part that I'm going to underline for you is called the function rule. So you take the function rule and you do it, you do the math, but x is no longer x, right? It's your input. So what that's going to say is -4 times x is no longer there. Remember, x gets swapped out, and in his stead comes the input -2, like that. Zero chance like you don't know what I'm talking about because you've done an entire, like a big long, like a 40 question assignment on this or something. So you do -4 times -2, which is 8, and 8 plus 5 is 13. So we would say that f of -2 is equal to 13, right? That should ring some bells. Okay, now we're going to scroll down. I'm going to scroll down to the next function. His name is g of x. And he's a little bit more complex. This is what we call a quadratic because it's got an x squared in it. Anything that has an x squared is called a quadratic. So a quadratic function is really just a little bit harder math to do, but not bad. Bless you. And again, the color coding of it is simple. We're going to take our input of -3 and we're going to put it in place of these two red x's. So anything that's an x is just saying, replace me with your input. And I like to show my work, and so I'm going to write this down. I'm going to write 2 times where the x used to be squared minus 5 times where the x used to be plus 3. And in those voids that I've created, I'm going to put the red number -3. Except I'm not going to make it red. I'm just going to make it white. So there you go. So the order of operations kicks in here. Remember, we are not going to do 2 times -3. We're going to fight that urge. We know that we have to do the exponentiation first. What is -3 squared? Definitely +9. Yeah, so I'm going to rewrite this now as 2 times 9 minus 5 times -3 plus 3. And then I'm just going to do some math. And again, in a perfect world, we just never miss basic math like this, bless you. But we also know that we're human, so let's do our best here. We can multiply and multiply. You should do both multiplications in the same step here. So what is 2 times 9? Yeah, in the net result, I'm going to draw a little green box around this. It's hard. It's sometimes people can overanalyze this. And I mean, bless you again. At the end of the day, really what I'm looking at in that green box, yeah, I know it says minus, but really it's a -5 times a -3, right? I mean, that's what it comes down to. And what's the net result of that green box? Definitely positive. So I'm going to add it in as a plus 15 plus 3. Good. Yeah, and then I'm going to just add them together. 18 plus 15 is 33 plus 3 is 36. So that should look completely and utterly familiar. So those are the underlying 2 prerequisite skills that you have to be able to do what we're learning today. So we good on that recap? That's how you evaluate a function. Remember, you just put the numbers in place of the letters and then work it out. Nothing to it. So I've got 3 examples today. I don't know if we need more, just let me know. Just always say like, can we practice another one? And yeah, no problem. So the first one I have for you is this. And these are new now. This is what we're learning today. So we have a function named f of x. And we're going to call him 4x squared minus 3x plus 5. And we have another function in the same problem named g of x. And his function rule is 2x minus 11. I'm not going to have you find f of a number, and I'm not going to have you find g of a number. I'm going to have you find this. And there's a different way to do this that is not appropriate for where we're at right now. At this stage in Algebra 1, having not done our unit on polynomial operations and squaring binomials and all that stuff, the more advanced mathy kind of way of doing this, we're going to leave out. Today, we're going to just do it old school, simple. The math is something you already know how to do. If you were to read this out loud, and I'm going to put it in little quotes for you just so that you can kind of understand how to say this. What this is saying right here is g of f of 3. So that's how we're going to read that when we see that, g of f of 3. Got it? And there's another notation. I made sure in my second example, I'll show you the other way we write composition. By the way, that is called a composition. When you do a function of another function, that's called a composition. You're composing them together with each other. So when I want to do this, the rule is as follows. The second one that you say is the first one that you do. So when you listen to yourself say this, you say g of f of 3. That means that f of 3 you do first. it becomes like a little math problem inside of another math problem. Because if I can do the math problem f of 3, which I can, then I'll get an answer like 2 or -10 or 13 or 0 or 9 or something like that. And then I can just take that answer and put it back where the yellow underlining is, and then go back and do g of whatever I get. Which, if that made sense, great. If it didn't, don't worry, it will. So again, do the second one you say first. You say it second, you do it first. So our first objective, we kind of got to do 2 math problems to get through one here, is we're going to find f of 3. So let's do f of 3 first of all. That means I have to go up to my original functions and make sure I choose the correct one. Obviously, I want to use the top function because he's the one named f. So I'm going to take 3, make that red, and I'm going to put 3 in place of these 2 red x's up at the top. You say it second, you do it first. So I'm heading up now to the function named f, and I'm going to evaluate him at the input of 3. So that's going to say this. It's going to say 4 blank squared minus 3 blank plus 5. And what am I going to put in those blanks? 3s, for sure, because that's the input. So I'm going to take 3, put it here, and put it here. Good so far? Okay, now we got to do our math. And again, we're going to fight the urge to do 4 times 3. Like, this is not the first time we've heard or done this before. So 4 times 3 is not the math problem here. The math problem is what? Right here. Yeah, make sure you do your exponents first. And so 3 squared is 9. And so I'm going to do 4 times 9. Remember, the 4 just has to wait his turn. Minus 3 times 3 plus 5. What's 4 times 9? 36. What's 3 times 3? 9. And then, of course, I copy down the plus 5. And then from here, it's just rinky-dink, left to right math. Remember, the addition and subtraction are always just left to right. So 36 minus 9 is 27 indeed, plus 5 is good. So 32 is now going to be our first answer. But this is the part where you could get really lost, or you could just got it. You might already have it. I don't know. The thing I underlined in yellow was a math problem. It said find f of 3, and we just found f of 3, and we figured out that f of 3 is 32. So using my pen, I can do this. I'm going to go up to where it used to say, watch carefully now, where it used to say f of 3, and I'm going to erase it. And I'm going to put 32. So really what this is you're like, oh, I'm just right back to where I was before. You just want me to find g of 32. Right. But you're the one that had to figure out the answer to the inside, the second function, so that you could use it now. It's funny that the output of the first one becomes the input for the second one. Go figure. So now we have to find g of 32, which means now we pick the second function named g. So I'm going to do some erasing now because this is all on video. So if anyone was like, oh, no, I didn't get that, you can always just hit the rewind button, right? So now I'm going to do some erasing, and I'm going to do g of 32, which really means just to take the function named g. So g of 32 is going to be 2 blank minus 11. And what am I going to put now in that blank? The input, 32. And again, it was an output of f, but f's output becomes g's input. Go figure. And then this one's pretty easy. What's 2 times 32? And what's 64 minus 11? 53 is our final answer. So we talk about like, okay, what's the answer? It's 53. G of f of whatever is 53. Indeed. Not bad. Okay. 2 more examples. This second example serves multiple purposes. It's going to feel like kind of doing the same thing. And yeah, to some extent, we kind of are. But the first thing I wanted you to see, well, let's get these functions down first. So f of x will be the function x plus 10. He's a simple function. He just takes what you feed him, adds 10, and gives it back. That's easy. G is a quadratic function. He takes what you give him and squares it. And then he multiplies what you give him by 3 and then subtracts those two answers. And then he takes away 12. Now this time I'm going to show you a little bit of, this one's a little bit different. I'm going to show you the notation in a different way. So this time we're going to find this. That little symbol is not a 0. It's not a multiplication sign. It's not the letter O. It is a composition notation that we use in math. And I tried hard to show you that it is not down low like a letter would sit on a line, like when you learned how to write back in like 2nd grade. And you always were taught to put your letters right on the writing line, right? He's not. He's elevated up like a multiplication sign would be, but he's smaller like a time sign would be, but he's also hollowed out. It kind of looks like a little letter O, but it's up high and small. And that replaces the word of. So this is just another notation for us to ask you to do a composition. We're asking you, if you were to say this, if Dallin were to say this out loud, he'd say, okay, you want me to do G of f of -6, correct? So again, when I say that out loud, G of f of -6, which one do I do first? Correct. If you say it second, you do it first. So my first priority when I'm doing G of f of a number is to do f of the number. So my job 1 is to find f of -6. Say it second, do it first. So if I put -6 in place of the function f, it will say, where it used to be x, it'll say -6 plus 10. That's just the function named f with his x replaced by a number. Help me with my math. I struggle with my numbers. What's -6 plus 10? Good. So my first answer is 4. Right? So that's an output, which becomes an input. So now I go back to the beginning and I say, okay, the first one I said is now the one I'm going to do. So since it was G of f of a number, I already did f of a number. Now I'm going to do G of 4. The answer to the first part becomes the input to the second part. Okay. So again, I'm going to do some erasing since this is all on video. I can do that because you can pause and stuff like that. So now my math problem is really just to take G of 4. You got to basically find the answer to put it in to do the second problem. So I'm going to use now the second function named G, and I'm going to write where there used to be an x squared minus 3 times where there used to be an x minus 12. And what am I going to put in those awkward blanks? 4. Let's do it. What's 4 squared? What's 3 times 4? What's 16 minus 12?
4.
What's 4 minus 12? And there is your answer. So the first example, you probably felt a little confused. Like, nah. Second one should have felt better. I would be remiss at this point if I stopped. We're going to do one more. And if it doesn't feel like that's good, just like I said earlier, just let me know. I'll help you some more. All right. F of x is 2x squared plus x minus 4. And g of x is -2x 4x minus 5. We are going to compose the other direction. Compositions are directional, they matter. Doing f of g of x, as you'll learn in like pre-calculus probably, when you take advanced math, if you decide to go that route, compositions, the direction matters. Composing f of g is different than composing g of f. They're very different situations. If they're not, then that's a very special case, and you'll talk about that again in a few. Okay. So we're going to go the other way. I've given you g of f in both of our first examples, so let's go the other way. Let's do f of g of -1. So what math problem will we do first? G. You say it second, you do it first. So we quite specifically are on a mission now to do g of -1. I got to find the answer to that so I can plug it back into the original f of whatever my answer is, right? So I'm going to do g of -1. That means I'm going to copy the function named g, except where there used to be an x, I'm going to put a blank for my input. So there's g of x right there. And what will I put in place of that awkward blank? -1. And again, if your issue is that you struggle with negatives, then that's something that I can just tell you, you got to download an app to practice. Like lessons like this are never about the basic math, it's about the concept. So I hope we're not getting hung up on basic nonsense. What's -4 times -1? +4. What's 4 minus 5? Oh, interesting that the input was the same as the output. Okay, it just happened. But that means now that we're going to start the process over. We're going to go back now and we're going to evaluate the function named f with all of his x's now changing into -1. Okay. So again, doing some erasing, I need to do f of this. Remember, this was my output for the first half. So now I'm going to do f of that answer, -1. So that's going to be 2 times blank squared plus blank minus 4. It's good practice to just put little parenthesis blanks wherever your input x's used to be. And you just fill them in. Easy peasy. So in those blanks, what am I going to put? -1. So I'm going to stick a -1 in here. Boop. Stick a -1 in here. Boop. And again, hope and pray that everything has gone well for the last 6-7 years of your education and that you can do basic math. So what math problem will we do first? Definitely the exponent. And what is this yellow cloud going to make? Definitely a +1. Yeah. So now this is 2 times +1. When you square a negative number, it always becomes a positive. And I'm just going to put -1. I don't like writing plus and negative. It makes me uncomfortable. So I'm just going to call it -1. What is 2 times 1? And what is 2 minus 1? And what is 1 minus 4? And that is your final answer. You think you can handle some of these? It is relatively simple, I think, as long as you don't think you're too cool for school and you're like that kid that wants to get it done as fast as you can so you can have some free time. You're probably going to have some issues, or if you struggle with basic things. So I'm just telling you, follow this example, show lots of work, you'll be fine. It's in Delta. It's all yours. I shall leave the recording up but paused. If you have questions, I shall unpause. Okay, fire away. What's your f of x? Yeah, I mean, okay, so your math problem is to do f of g of 2. Great, but I need to know what the functions are. Okay, what's g of x? +1. Okay. So the math problem that we're going to do first is always the one that we say second. So we have to do g of 2 before we do anything else. So we're going to take 2 and put it into the g function right there. So that's going to be -5 times blank plus 1. And in place of that blank, we're going to put 2, correct? Okay. So when you do -5 times 2, you get -10. And -10 plus 1 is -9. So we agree on this one? That's great news. So really now, since the problem said to find f of g of 2, we don't need g of 2 there anymore. We need to put the answer to g of 2, which was -9. So now we have to do f of -9. Got it? So we're on the same page still? Great. Okay. So we're going to take the function named f now, and we are going to change all of his x's into the yellow number. So it's going to say blank squared plus 6 times blank plus 11. Now, did you use a calculator for this? Okay. Hey, I'm going to leave this on the recording because I want you all to be aware of something. When you use calculators, which as I've said for a while now, I support, I understand, and I'm okay with it, like I really am. But understand that if you type, I hope you're listening, because this happens, I'm sorry, all the time. Your calculator, I need you to understand, I don't take this word lightly. Your calculator will never make a mistake. And I mean never. It will always do exactly what you tell it to do. We clear? So if you type -9 squared into your calculator, it will tell you that the answer is -81. And you know, you've got to be the boss. You know that that's not right. The calculator didn't mess up. The calculator did exactly what you told it to do. So if a student were to have typed this in and gotten -81, the calculator didn't make an error. There are 2 things I have to say about this. Number 1, and I can say this at any level, if I were teaching 7th grade all the way up to 14th grade, 2nd year college students, I would say the same thing. Number 1, you already know that the answer to this yellow problem is going to be positive, don't you? Like, don't just agree with me to be polite. You know that when you square a negative number, it becomes a positive, right? So piece of advice number 1 is this. If you're going to use a calculator for -9 squared, here you go. Just don't type in the negative at all. What purpose does it serve? None, because you know that it's just going to square away and become a positive. So that's pro tip number 1. But if you're absolutely just hell-bent on putting the negative into your calculator, what did this student do that caused the calculator to give this answer that they didn't want? The student forgot to type something in. What was it? Say that again. Yes. So again, if you are absolutely bent on putting the negative in, I'm telling you the easiest way, like if I got to do -37 squared, because I don't know what that equals, I just don't type in the negative. I just type in 37 squared because I know it's going to come out the same as -37, right? But again, if you really want the negative, you must put it in parentheses. We clear? And that is why you missed this problem right there. So thank you for listening if you did. Now, back to you. If we evaluate this yellow oval correctly, we now see that, oh, it comes out to +81. And what is 6 times -9 right there? Good. And I see exactly where you got your answer, because if this is a -81, like I know you had, then that's why your answer went so deep and dark into the negatives. Think about it, -81 and 81. Sometimes people say, oh, I was close. You're off by 162 when that negative shouldn't be there, right? So now when we look at it correctly, we have +81 minus 54, which is 27, and 27 plus 11 is 38. Telling you again, last time, if you're going to square something on a calculator, just don't even put a negative on it because it's going to go away anyway. Anyone else want an assist while I got this recording unpaused? You want to read your problem? Would you mind? What's your
I equal 3x squared minus 7x
g of x?
equals negative x minus
And what are we finding?
and then f or even b for this negative.
So again, at the beginning of class in the lecture, I put a little thing. Let me see if I can go back and find it. No, I erased it. Do you remember when I put the little thing in quotes? How do we say this out loud? We should never, we should, no, that's us talking math. Good job. F of G of -3. That's how we say it. No parentheses needed. So what math problem do we have to do first? Right. So this, I'm going to put a gold box around it. Your gold box up there is your priority numero uno. So we're going to take this function right here, and we're going to change its x into -3. So it's going to say this, negative x minus 4, right? You see it? Now, what are we going to put in place of the blank? Good. And if someone misses this problem, usually the reason why they miss it is because by not showing enough work, they didn't give themselves a chance to see that that negative was already there, and that negative we just added in, which turns these into a +3 minus 4, which is, now we're cooking with bacon grease. So now that we found the answer to the first portion of the problem, the -1 is our output, which becomes our input. The math problem that you and I really have to do now is f of -1. You still with me? So we're going to take and find f of -1, which means to take the function named f and copy him down. And every time you encounter an x, that's an input, you leave it blank and just put some parentheses. So there is 3 blank squared minus 7 blank minus 3. And what are we going to put in those blanks? Nice. Now, order of operations demands here that we do things in a very particular order. What must we do first? You betcha. So this, I like to draw this little cloud around it just to really drive the point home. That is our only concern. What is -1 squared? Certainly not. That's even worse. Like we just discussed this, that when you square a negative, it will become a positive. So the answer is definitely positive, but it is 1, correct? Never, ever, ever square something and have it be a negative. Okay, not until we get to algebra 2 and we're squaring complex numbers. Okay, then we'll talk about that again in a couple of years. Okay, so -1 squared is 1. So this is now 3 times 1 minus 7 times -1 minus 3. And all I need from you now is a couple multiplication answers. I need the answer to that green box, and I need the answer to that red box, and then we're home free. What's 3 times 1? What is -7 times -1? So I'm going to put plus, because since it's positive. So what is 3 plus 7? And what is 10 minus 3? Jackpot. Anyone else need an